Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey Seattle Kraken podcast. RJ, this is not the week that I was hoping we could talk about, right? Obviously went out to Toronto. I was hoping that we could talk about that and how great it was, how much fun this road trip's been, how great the road trip's been for the team. Unfortunately, that's not really kind of what happened. I did go to Toronto. I did have a good time, but the team, RJ, I mean, they are struggling right now in a way that we just have not seen yet this season.
Right. It's kind of been new low after new low for the Kraken this week, and it's something we got to break down because there's some real struggles that we've talked about on the last few post games, but especially with the lack of scoring. It's looking like it could be a real issue for this team, and I think that's what the majority of this episode is going to be about.
Yes, it is. We're going to break down things from an analytics perspective, from a visual perspective, from an individual player performance perspective. We're going to get into all of it as we go through here, as well as the big news that did come out this morning, beating the deep dive curse. So thanks to the Kraken for getting that done early for us here. First things first, though, of course, RJ, we have to talk about our wonderful sponsor, Queen Anne Beer Hall.
That's right. And Dylan, it's November now, new month. And of course, you know what that means. A new burger of the month, because Queen Anne Beer Hall does this every single month. And this month, tell me whether you try this one, the jalapeno popper smash.
Oh.
Yeah, spice things up a little bit,
yeah.
right? I know you like a little spice.
Yeah.
Right. So here it is, the jalapeno popper smash. It's a smash patty with jalapeno cream cheese spread, fried onion strings, and bacon. So not the long list of things you'd normally see in one of their burgers, but I think, you know what? It's just simple, and I think all the flavors are going to work together. And you get a little bit of that crunch too with the fried onion strings.
Yeah, no, I think there is something to keeping it simple and just, those are all still like big bold flavors. You don't need to really mask or hide those. Like, you want those to kind of be the thing that's coming up. Yeah, I think the crunch from depending on the bacon and the onion strings. Obviously, I'm not a big onion fan, but I think I understand texturally why it's there. Yes, I did make a face for the listeners not watching. But no, I could understand texturally why you'd want that there, and it would make a big deal, I think. So yeah, no, I'm liking that they're going a little hot as the weather's getting a little cold, RJ.
I know, that's good. You want something to warm you up as this weather's getting colder. And I love the inclusion of the cream cheese too. It's just a Seattle thing, right? Like on a Seattle dog, you just throw the cream cheese on there. It's awesome.
Yeah, and having it be the flavored cream cheese, like that's good stuff. That's good stuff.
Yep.
So definitely go check out Queen Anne Beer Hall for that latest burger of the month. I also feel compelled, RJ, because this is election day. Say go vote. go do that, so we can throw that.
I will be doing that right after we record this.
Yep. And then we can get into things here, RJ. The big news that I talked about earlier that the Kraken went ahead and made this morning was bringing up one Ryan Winterton. I wonder where they got that idea.
I know. We wouldn't have talked about that on the last post game, right? No one would have suggested that in chat or anything.
No, I definitely don't think we had about like 15 different chat messages about them doing that or anything.
Especially right at the end of the stream too.
Yeah.
But the Kraken go ahead and do it. They call up Ryan Winterton, which also was super convenient because the Firebirds are in Colorado right now.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't have to go very far. And look, the Kraken are looking for a little bit of spark from their forward group, and I think Winterton has a chance of giving that to them.
Yeah, Ryan Winterton's been playing well down in Coachella Valley. He's got 5 points through 7 games. He's looked really good. He's doing a lot of the things that the Kraken have been struggling with that we'll get into in just a little bit. But if you look at the tape from Ryan Winterton last year, both in Coachella Valley and then this year in Coachella Valley, like I said, you just see the stuff that the Kraken have kind of been missing. You see a player who's going to go to the net front, who reads the ice well, who is going to help contribute on offense, both off the rush, but also once things kind of get stuck and bogged down in the offensive zone. He knows how to get open. He knows how to find open players, and he knows just how to be a menace out there. And the Kraken, this last week, really on this road trip, have really been missing that. And so I think that bringing him up is a good idea, and playing him is an even better idea. I assume, RJ, that they will be playing him tonight against Colorado. I can't imagine you do this call up if the plan was just to have him around as an extra forward.
Yes, the Kraken historically have never been ones to call up guys like this in a situation where you don't need an extra in order to just not play them. I would bet just about whatever that he's going to be in the lineup tonight. Now, as for where we're going to see him, because that we don't know. I think
Yeah.
morning skate is just about starting right now for the Kraken. And I don't know if it's optional or full, so we may not get line rushes until later, though. I know you had an idea, though, of a player you wanted to see him play with.
Did I?
I thought so, or
Yeah,
an idea
no.
maybe that Shane Wright.
Yeah, no, I did. It took me a sec because the last 24 hours have been a blur. Multiple flight delays yesterday kind of wiped me out. Yes, why not play him with Shane Wright? They worked so well together last season. The way that they both can attack the net front, I think, is really special when they're out there. They have chemistry. They understand where each other likes to play. So many goals last season for Ryan Winterton were him being net side while Shane would enter the slot and then make a slick pass over to him. And then the goalie just has no time to kind of get over there and cover the top part of the net. Winterton's able to bury it. And then vice versa. Ryan Winterton's a really good player at going down below the goal line. He can go collect the puck. And then he knows his buddy Shane is going to be streaking down the slot, and he just throws it there, and they just have that timing down. And so, yes, if Ryan Winterton's going to play tonight, which I think he will and he should, I would stick him out there with Shane Wright and let the two of them kind of rekindle some of that chemistry that they had through a lot of last season's Firebirds run.
And we've talked about wanting more production from Shane Wright, or him to play maybe even a little more selfish style of game and unlock that shot. This is one potential way of doing it. We've talked about maybe putting him between McCann and Eberle again, but if you're looking for a way to keep the current first line intact, this would be another way to maybe try and put him in those positions he was in Coachella Valley last year.
Right, and give him somebody that is going to consistently shoot. Because, I mean, Ryan Winterton is a player who averaged about 2 shots a game last year, averaging 2 shots a game this year. That's something that the Kraken as a whole, especially after like that Boston game where you go practically the whole first period with no shots on goal, something the Kraken could probably use right now. Somebody who's going to go out there and be a shooter. Shane having a shooter on his lineup. We saw how that kind of worked at the beginning of the year with him, with Jared McCann and Jordan Eberle. I think having somebody like that with Shane Wright works. I also think it's interesting, RJ, because we had been speculating too before this call up and really before that last post game. John Hayden has made this road trip with the Kraken as an extra forward, and this call-up would signal that, again, we're probably not going to see John Hayden tonight. That really indicates to me that Coach Dan Bylsma probably really does want to play this kind of skating, more focused on agility and speed kind of game rather than, okay, let's kind of break it down. Let's go simple. Let's try to just outmuscle them, outbody them, send guys in on the forecheck, all of that kind of stuff. Because if that was the case, John Hayden probably would have been seen by now or would have been seen tonight, and you don't see this call-up happen.
Right. Now, with that in mind, who do you think we see come out of the lineup?
That is an interesting question.
Says Karche to me.
It's
Karche, yeah, because they wouldn't scratch Tanev, but Karche to me, I think, would be the guy.
He's probably most likely, although we've talked about how Karche at times, like in last game, was like the only guy with anything going in that first period. He's looked good. I mean, do you think that Dan would consider having a Firebirds line of Karche, Wright, and Winterton?
That could actually be pretty fun. Maybe he would stick with that. But if not him, then who? I want Tolvanen?
Tolvanen's the one that comes to mind for me. I know there's probably like 100,000 people, not that we get that many listeners, but I'm sure there's a lot of people screaming Andre Burakovsky's name right now. But here's the thing. The reason I don't think that would happen is because who's the player these last couple games when they pull the goaltender, which they've done in each of the last 3 games, that the coaching staff sends out there as the extra attacker? It's Andre Burakovsky. That tells me that the coaching staff values him in some way, right? Like you're not making that player, you're not going to make that the guy and then you're going to bench him the next game, probably, I think. So just based on that, I would say Tolvanen, because I think Tolvanen's kind of in the same boat as Berkey and as really a lot of players in this lineup, which is just they're not really performing. The energy level was certainly not there in the last game. Any of the push or the drive that they needed to have, the juice, as Dan would call it, it was just not there. And so I think you could really kind of pick a decent amount of guys out of this lineup to make this call. But I think if he's going to stick with Ty Karche, because Karche has had some of that energy and he wants to kind of have a Firebirds line, I think Tolvanen becomes the guy.
Yeah, Tolvanen would also make sense given if you're trying to generate offense, because we did a little bit of a deeper dive before this, just researching into some of the individual numbers that we'll get to later. But the big thing with Tolvanen, my big takeaway was just that basically nothing happens when he's on the ice. Nothing for you, but also nothing against you. And so I think he's played well defensively. But if you're looking to boost some goal scoring, he might be one to take out of the lineup.
Yes, if the end result goal is a track meet, Tolvanen has not been that kind of player this season. And it did seem like back when the Kraken were winning games, those were the games the Kraken were winning. So that would be something. So it'll be interesting to see who gets out of there. We'll kind of keep our eye on it to see if anything comes out of morning skate. Not too many media people there to potentially tell us, though. So we'll see if we get any news.
Sparsely attended road trip, I feel like.
Yes, I can confirm that is the case, actually. But interesting stuff there. Let's talk about the larger offensive issues, though, for this team, right? Let's go ahead and deep dive into that. Well, actually, let's talk about something positive first. And I know you definitely wanted to talk about this, RJ, so I'll kind of let you kick it off, and that is goaltending.
And it's kind of gotten lost in the lack of goal scoring for the Kraken, but I think the team's goaltending has really solidified, and it is worth talking about, especially because I think we're so critical even just a week ago about the goaltending and it needed to be better. And we even brought up comments from a John Forsland talking about how the goaltending needs to be better, and that was after the Winnipeg game. And since then, I feel like the goaltending has actually kind of turned on a dime and has gotten much, much better. And despite the team's losses, like the goaltending has not been a reason why. Joey Daccord has been excellent. He's done just about everything you can ask him to do. He's at the level where I think he is stopping anything in which he has a chance.
Yeah.
Just give him a slightest chance and he's stopping it. And then Philip Grubauer has come in for one game since that Ottawa game, and I thought he was pretty solid in that one. He looked good, definitely better than he had earlier this season. And we're starting to see it in the numbers as well, with like the goals saved above expected. Joey Daccord getting into the top 10 in the league by some measures. And then Philip Grubauer, again, he only played the one game, but the fact that he looked so solid in that one was really reassuring to me. And so I think the biggest plus from this team recently has been the goaltending.
And it's such a shame that the offense has just so completely dried up, because this is the kind of stuff that a week ago we were talking about. Hey, if you could just stop like one more goal, this team's winning these games. The standings looks different. You're very much on your way to a playoff spot. All of that stuff is what we were talking about, and it's incredible how much this team has just taken a 180 in both directions, right? Offense completely dried up. Goaltending has looked stellar and fantastic. But yes, Joey did a great job kind of being the de facto starter, starting the vast majority of these games and playing well and consistently playing well through all of them. I think that's a big thing to note, as, sign that contract extension. We don't really know what the future holds for Philip Grubauer past this season with the team and all of that kind of stuff. At some point, based on all of that, it signals Joey will have to be the guy for this team at some point down the line. And he has proven, at least so far here during this road trip, that he can do it, just like he did last year, right? Last year, he's proving that run he had was not a fluke. That is just kind of who he is when he can get in there and get into a rhythm. So I think that's really positive to see. I think it was positive for Grubauer to have a bounce back game, because he really, really needed one. And I think that it's probably got to have helped his confidence and helped the coaching staff's confidence as far as putting him out there and putting him in there. Do we just need John Forsland to call out the forward group now, RJ? Is that the trick here? Is it just John Forsland making public comments that catch people a little by surprise, that kind of whips things into shape here?
I feel like it wouldn't hurt. I mean, when somebody that respected, a legend in the game, who again, probably doesn't have much incentive to be negative about things, given this is the team that he's calling games for. If he says something, I feel like, look, I don't know that it really makes a big impact on the ice, but the players are listening if he says something. And so, maybe, although I feel like calling out the forward group at this point kind of goes without saying. I feel like he doesn't need to say anything at this point.
I feel like everyone has probably been doing that. Was there anything else with the goaltenders you wanted to mention before we move into the offense?
Real quick, I do want to give credit to the coaching staff for kind of recognizing that I feel like Joey had maybe separated himself
Mhm.
and they decided to go with him as the starter. Look, they broke the every other game goalie rotation for that Carolina game. And at that point, Joey was coming off arguably his worst game of the season. But I
Mhm.
think they had recognized, just as far as the overall body of work, that he was the better of their two goaltenders, and they played him like that. And I think he's rewarded them by getting into that rhythm and taking the most advantage of those games.
Yeah, and as ugly as that Carolina game looked, Dan did say afterwards that he felt like it was Joey's best performance,
And to
and
that point, I
it
think it
was, yeah.
was. And I think he's since surpassed it. I mean, you look at this last Boston game. Okay, I want to talk about this a little bit because
Yeah.
the fact that game was only 2-0 is just incredible and speaks to how well Joey did. And this is from Kraken stats after the game. And this is actually from Natural Stat Trick. The Kraken allowed 6.01 over 6 expected goals against. They only allowed 2 goals against in the game.
Yeah.
That is a heck of a quality start for Joey Daccord.
That's gotta be one of the top goaltending performances of the season so far.
It has to be, right? Yeah,
Right,
I don't know where that
four
ranks.
four
But
expected goals saved above, 4 goals
yeah,
saved above expected, like, that's incredible.
yeah, that's just hard to even have the opportunity to do, much
Yes.
less make the saves.
Much less actually do it. So yeah, that is arguably like the best game a goaltender has played all season in the NHL, probably. And yeah, the fact that that game was close at all was all thanks to Joey Daccord. It was otherwise an extremely rough performance. But I mean, look, if you're going to kind of silver line all of this even more, you look at this and you say, okay, both goalies look like they're playing well right now. They're going to keep this team in games. That means if they can figure out the offensive side of things, they could start winning games again, right? Like this is still doable. It's not like both sides of the ice are starting to kind of dip at the same time.
Right. And so that is a positive potentially going forward. And also the fact that you have both, because I would start to get worried about Joey maybe getting burned out if Grubauer wasn't looking good. But I think that was also reassuring. And I would expect, again, we don't know because morning skate's not over, but I would expect Grubauer to go tonight, given it's Colorado.
I would expect as much as well. That would make sense to me. And because he played well his last outing. So offensively, though, RJ, because none of this goaltending matters if you can't score. And the Kraken have scored 1 goal in their last 3 games, and that did come with Joey pulled, by the way. They had to go 6-on-5 in order to get 1 goal in their last 180 minutes of hockey, RJ. And I think they only scored once. Did they only score once against Carolina?
Yes, they did only score once
Yeah,
against
so
Carolina.
2 goals in your last 4 games is not really the way to rack
Well,
up
the Montreal
wins.
game in between.
Oh yeah, the Montreal game in between. I blocked that out because that just seemed like the fakest game of all time now. At the time,
Yes,
it was great.
I'm with
but-
you on that. But even this last 3-game stretch, I mean, this is the fewest
Yeah.
goals the Kraken have scored in any 3-game stretch in the franchise history. I think their worst offensive stretch in any 3 games in franchise history, just looking at the games. And so the point stands.
Yes, and what's weird about that is it comes on the heels of the Kraken having a good start to the season and one in which we really thought things were turning around and a lot of these offensive issues were going to not be as bad. I don't want to say they weren't going to be there, but it didn't feel like they were going to be as bad because of the way the team was playing, the schemes that the coaching staff had brought in, the new style, the offensive pieces that were added over the offseason, most notably Brandon Montour being able to help move the puck from out of the defensive zone and push it up the ice with speed. And that's like all gone. We're right back to talking about this Kraken group, RJ, the way that we've always talked about Kraken teams, really, outside of season 2 when they could, just shoot anything at the net and it was going to go in. And that's just, this is a team that is just not good at generating offense. It's not that they can't always finish. It's that they can't even generate chances.
Right. And that's been the big takeaway for me as I kind of dug into this over the last couple days because I wanted to see, okay, are they just getting unlucky or are they getting more or less what they deserve given the quality that they're generating? And unfortunately, I found, to me at least, that it was the latter. Now, the eye test, just watching the games, tells me that, yeah, they're not generating enough. But I wanted to see if the numbers back that up. And from what I found, the numbers do back that up. You look at just on Natural Stat Trick, all situations, they have 32 expected goals on the season. They've scored 36, so they're actually outperforming what they're generating by those numbers. And then I retweeted something from Micah Blake McCurdy, who was looking at the Kraken recent form scoring, and he said feast or famine for Seattle goal scoring, and it surely has been that with the actual goals. But one thing I noticed as he was looking at the expected goals and the actual goals over the last 10 games is that the Kraken have actually scored more than they've been expected to, and they haven't hit 3 expected goals. They've only done it once in the last 10 games. And it was that Montreal game, and they barely hit it, and they scored 8 in that one. So even then, they're overperforming the kind of quality that they're generating. So I think that's the more worrying sign, is not just that they're struggling to score it, but it feels like they're kind of getting what they deserve, given what they're generating.
Right. I was pulling up on Natural Stat Trick the kind of tables to see where in the league they fall. And if you look at things like expected goals for percentage, so as far as generating more chances than the opposing team out there, the Kraken are sub 50%. The other teams are generating more chances, more expected goals for than the Kraken are. And if you look at even strength, RJ, Kraken are second to last in the league in expected goals for percentage at 42.29%. So it's not even like, oh, you're kind of keeping it even and close around 50%. Like, that's very heavily weighted in favor of other teams, ahead of only the Montreal Canadiens. So just maybe,
I'm not surprised to see them at the bottom.
Yeah, maybe put that 8-2 game into perspective there. That's the only team that they're better than. You look at the expected goals for that they've generated just as a number, and it's 23.83, and you've generated that in 13 games, which means you are not generating 2 expected goals per game right now as a team. And that feels like a bar that is not unattainable, RJ, and it seems like one that if you want to be a playoff team, you should hit.
Right, and you need to hit historically. Remember, Dylan, we looked at what playoff teams ended up scoring last year, and I basically had to hit at least 3 goals. On the very low end, 3 goals a game is roughly what you needed. And so 2 goals a game is just certainly not enough. We're talking then bottom of the league type numbers when you look at goals generated, and something that might even be worse than last season. I can't believe we're talking about it in those terms, but those are the numbers that we're seeing so far, and they roughly match what it seems like they deserve. The other caveat I want to give too is that, yes, it has been feast or famine. Like, there have been times where it looks like the offense is clicking and they have scored goals in bunches, whether it's the Montreal game, the Philly game, the Nashville game. But I look at those and it feels like every time in post game, I mention this, right? That yes, it's great. The offense is coming together and they're scoring all these goals. But I think one common thread you see through all these is just an abysmal goaltending performance on the other end. Not just bad, but truly awful. And I think we see that with Montembeault in the Montreal game, where he gets pulled before the game is over. He can't track a single point shot. We see that with Fedotov in the Philly game, where he gets yanked before the game is over. And I mean, he can't stop a shot that goes right through his legs. He just has so many holes on him. And then UC Saros just clearly looking off. For me, it seems when the offense has come and the goals have come together, there's just been a really bad goalie performance on the other end. And I've yet to see them put up good numbers against a goalie playing even a somewhat decent game.
Yeah, and that's a real problem. And maybe the couple times that you were playing a certain style of hockey that they've kind of gotten away from, but it's one where, this is just kind of historically the problem for the Kraken, just in general, right? And we've seen now some different players come and go, right? Whether through trades, free agent acquisitions, whatever, over the course of time. We've now had a coaching change. You've had scheme changes, right? It just feels like, RJ, we've slowly been removing all of the other variables that don't just kind of point to, this is just a core group of players that struggle to score at the National Hockey League level. Because I don't really know what else it is. You're playing a different style than you've played before, and yet you're still having the same results. And that tells me then that it's kind of on the players.
Right. We've asked this question about, is it personnel or is it coaching or what is it? And so much the last couple years, we've talked about what the team can do to score more goals, whether it was last year with Hackstall and like, you go to the front of the net, you go to the areas where the goals are scored. This year with you get up the ice quickly, which is what Bilesma's team is trying to do. And look, this coaching staff can scheme for offense. They have schemed for offense this season. You can do everything you want from a scheme perspective. But I think the unfortunate reality that we're kind of closing in and accepting at this point is that with the roster this coaching staff has been given, they just cannot get enough out of it consistently enough to win enough games and to score enough goals. That's where I'm at. I'm kind of ready to accept that with what this roster is on paper, there's just no way you can get enough goal scoring out of it consistently. At least not, I mean, the one, I guess, bit of hope you could hold out is that the absence of Vince Dunn is what's keeping all of this from coming together. And maybe that's the case, but still, even with Dunn in the lineup, we haven't seen it consistently enough over the last couple seasons. I think this is a problem of composition and ultimately the roster that Ron Francis has put together.
Right. And even if it is Vince Dunn and Vince Dunn comes back and he's able to help stabilize things offensively, it's still not a great sign that you lose one player who's not even a forward, by the way, and your offense completely dries up. Like, that's still a construction issue that you have for this team. Because it's not even like, Edmonton losing McDavid, right? Like, it's you literally are losing a defenseman and all of a sudden you just can't create offense at all. That's a worrying sign. And I know there's some other stuff that we'll talk about with it in a little bit, but I do look at, and I've said this before, how kind of uncreative a lot of the players on this roster are, how that's really what separates NHL players from the superstars, is that ability to create and try things and do things differently in the moment while the game is going, and you have half a second, quarter of a second to process, make a read, and then execute on what that read tells you to do. And I get it. Star players don't grow on trees. Right? Like we know that it is hard to come by those guys at the National Hockey League level. There are plenty of other teams around this league that don't necessarily have those guys either. And it is something that you do have to find a way to work around. And this is where I'll kind of work in the coaching staff and say, like, they can be better in this one area, because one of the consistent things I've noticed, RJ, just watching it, and I think this last week is kind of indicative of this, is starting in that Carolina game, we saw a Carolina team that really pressured the Kraken a lot, did not give them a lot of space in their own zone to break the puck out, played them tough through the neutral zone, played them tough at the high part of their defensive zone, the offensive zone for the Kraken, and the Kraken were not then able to attack in transition, and that just meant there was going to be no offense in that game. And I look at the Toronto game, and there was elements of that. I look at the Ottawa game, there was elements of that. I look at the Boston game, and there was a lot of that, where it was just take away the transition, and this team will not do anything to you. And that's a problem, and that's not just on the players. That is where I think the coaching staff comes in and deserves a little bit of critique, just because at some point you need to find different ways of breaking the puck out, entering the zone, cycling something and generating something in the offensive zone. You cannot be so wholly reliant on one thing the way that the Kraken have been, especially when that one thing, RJ, is so easy to take away because you have literally 3 different zones in which you can disrupt it.
And it's easy to get numbers back too, right? It's as simple as just having somebody not commit quite as much offensively, and you can just muck up the neutral zone, the D zone, or heck, even what the Kraken are breaking the puck out. I'm with you on all of that. They need a secondary way of scoring besides this transition game, because teams have gotten wise to it. I think we've seen enough of a sample size. Teams are wise to it. And it's the kind of thing where, especially in the regular season, where you don't have a ton of time to game plan for each individual opponent, right? You just look at, okay, what's the thing they do? Let's take it away. You need a secondary way of generating offense, or at least something that makes the other team respect that you can score a different way, so then you can go back to scoring the way that you want to. That said, I think the Kraken have I don't want to say go as far as to say adjusted, but they've had plenty of offensive zone time where it's not a transition game, but then okay, you go
Yeah.
in, you forecheck, you cycle in the offensive zone, and they've done that. And we saw it certainly a lot in the third period against Boston. We saw it at times against Ottawa. We saw it even in Toronto a little bit, and yet they can't generate goals that way. And I know that's basically what you're saying as far as scheming a way to generate goals that way. But I go back to the collection of players on the roster. And I know one thing you've pointed out in some of the post games is that you just have a bunch of distributors who are just circling around in the zone and aren't going to be the kind of guy that tries to make a risky move and generate something or tries to do something themselves. They're waiting for somebody else to open up or whatever it is. I don't know that that's where a difference maker comes into play, who can kind of open up something that if the other team is just going to stay defending and give you the outside, you need somebody to open something up. And I just don't know that they even have those guys.
They certainly don't have enough of them, right? Like that is the thing. And you have guys that could be that way, but it would require them to consciously change the way that they play the game. And I think that that's something that has been the struggle here now over two different coaching staffs, because we talked the same stuff that you could talk about here. And yeah, that Ottawa game, you could not ask for more offensive zone possession time than what you got in that Ottawa game, and you did nothing with it. And that's where both last year under Dave Hackstall, when we were talking about this team needs to go net front, they need to go net front. You have to try to generate goals there. What we've been talking about this last week is what happened to the team that went net front. You went net front the first 2 weeks of the season. You had some success doing it. Jordan Eberle was scoring a bunch of goals. He looked great. They've completely gotten away from that, and everything is dried up. And I think that it's not necessarily just the physical act of going to the net front, but you were giving guys like Matty Beniers, Chandler Stevenson, Andre Burakovsky, all of these great passers that you have on your team, you were giving them an option to pass to. Because the bottom line is, if they're just going to cycle it to somebody on the half boards, the point, or below the goal line, nobody's ever going to be in a high percentage chance to shoot the puck or score. And that's really just a problem. And that's where like the eye test, I think, tells you a lot of this is that you could just watch these guys play right now. And you're watching, I know a lot of people have been critical of the dump and chase, and I can talk about that in a second. But for me, it's more so it's the cycling and the fact that there's, again, just like last season, different coaching staff, same problem. There's just nobody in the middle of the ice. There's just nobody there. Or then you look at something like the power play, and you do have a dedicated person there who's playing in that bumper spot, and they're never once passed to, and they don't particularly do a good job of making themselves available for a pass either. They just kind of stand there straight-legged and just kind of bob around, and it just doesn't seem like there's anything that's telling them, whether it's from a coaching staff or internally, to just kind of go to space and get open up a passing lane for yourself. Anybody who's watched any of my scouting videos, you know how big a deal I think it is when you see a smart player and the way they maneuver themselves in the offensive zone away from the puck, so that there is always a line open to them so that somebody can feed them the puck, right? Like that's so much of it. It's not just the guy with the puck who has to make the read and then make the pass. Other players can get open for them and make sure that there is a lane open to them. That is the other half of the equation. And right now, this Kraken team has none of that. There's nobody trying to get open for passes anywhere.
And it's the kind of thing where, look, if this was February or March, I would be wondering, okay, you do take extra punishment going to the net, right? It is hard going to those dirty areas and doing it consistently. And it's the kind of thing that can be exhausting over the course of a whole season, especially when you need that effort every single night, like a playoff bubble team does. But I feel like we're still early enough in the season. I don't know why we're not seeing it at this point.
And you're struggling, right? Like, how do you not, just for a game, just to break out of it? Like, after that Ottawa game, how do you not go into Boston and you're just like, we're going to make this the greasiest, dirtiest game just so we can grind out a win and just get some positive momentum here. And instead you come out and you don't get a shot for like 15 minutes.
Yeah. I was going to say, at least to that point, though, you need like a shred of offensive zone time to at least get to the right areas. They didn't even have that.
Yeah, no, it was just such a mess all the way around. But yeah, those are the things that I look at, and it's a struggle. And I know, like I said, the dump and chase has been a big thing the last couple post games. I've gotten questions about it on the Discord, and so I kind of want to talk about that because I don't think that that's really the issue. Obviously, you want to have controlled zone entries. That is that is the ideal. That's in a perfect world, you are going to play that way. I've talked about how on some of the last couple post games, how you know, how aggressive NHL defensemen play and how aggressive they defend their blue line, especially against a team they know wants to attack in transition. That's one of the ways that you stop them. That's what we're seeing from a lot of these teams. And so if a player is moving up the ice the way a lot of these Kraken these last couple Kraken games have gone, where it's only one player, it's just the puck carrier. They don't really have another option coming with them because the team has just been bogged down in the defensive zone, or they had to have a winger drop down in the defensive zone to help get the puck out because they've struggled breaking the puck out. You don't really have an option to pass to. You don't really have anywhere to go. You just have to dump it in, because the alternative is you challenge that defenseman. If that defenseman wins, all of a sudden the puck is going in the other direction, and it's going with speed, and it's going with the other team having momentum with the puck, right? And so that's why teams dump and chase, is because you hit that situation, instead of taking your chances, challenging that defenseman, you say, I have to keep the puck moving in a positive direction. I'll dump it in. Now I have momentum to go get the puck. The defenseman has to turn around, right? That's a win for the offensive side. I go in, and then by the time I get the puck, I have players here in support. I can start a cycle. We can start generating something offensively. That's the idea behind the dump and chase. And because of, like I said, how the Kraken have struggled to break the puck out of their own zone, there's been a lot of situations where that has just been their only option. They have not had the option of entering with speed and entering with a teammate the way that we saw earlier in the season, and that's why we're seeing a lot more dump and chase. But there's more to it than that. There's also, I think this is where some of the roster construction comes in. You need to have players capable, RJ, of challenging an NHL defenseman, right? And winning that battle and deking them out, making a move past them, being able to fight through them. And the Kraken don't really have a lot of those guys on this roster, right? As we've talked about, it's not a team that has a bunch of these top performers. And I think that's why we really see Maddie as the one guy that has been the controlled entry machine. And that's because, look, he does have that potential. He was a second overall pick, right? Like he has that. And we've seen him really work on that. It seems like through training camp and through this earlier part of the season, he is unafraid to kind of challenge guys and kind of go at them. And look, he's making moves. He knows how to throw it between their stick or between their legs and go around them. He knows how to fight through their stick now in a way that he didn't in the past. And so I think that's another element of it, is the Kraken just don't have the personnel to kind of go for contested zone entries.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Matty Beniers, because he has been the only guy really consistently able to do that. And the skating, is, you could tell, has gotten even better and faster this year. But there's nobody. I mean, maybe a Brandon Montour, if he can kind of get through that first level and he's in a position to try and get a zone entry. But that is, again, rarer as a defenseman. That's why you need forwards who can do this sort of thing, because that's the position they're usually in. But that's I just basically want to echo everything you said on the dump and chase. Like you said, like a controlled zone entry is the ideal. That's what you always want. But on the flip side, making you dump and chase is the ideal for the defense. And so they're always going to try and take away the controlled zone entry. And so you have to force it by either speed, like you said, or numbers, where if you can get the puck up quickly and you have numbers, they have to back off. And teams have just taken that away. Like it's easier to take away the numbers. Yeah.
And so as long as the Kraken continue not to have that, then we're not going to see them. We're going to see a lot more of the dump and chase, because it's the only pseudo positive that they can have. It's the only thing that keeps the puck moving in the right direction. If you're the Kraken there is some stuff you can do to try to scheme guys open in the middle of the ice, RJ, and some other teams do this. And I talked about this yesterday on Discord, answering somebody's question about it. And we'll actually see some of it tonight. Colorado's a good example if you watch that Nathan MacKinnon line of how they can do this. And but it requires numbers, and it requires you to kind of pause a little in the neutral zone while you have guys break towards the middle. You do handoffs as guys are crisscrossing each other, and you're trying to confuse the defense, move the puck, try to keep some momentum with it. But the bottom line is you are spending more time in the neutral zone. And when you spend more time in the neutral zone, one, it can become crowded pretty quick as the other team gets back and joins there. So you're not ever able to take advantage of odd man opportunities. Not that the Kraken are right now anyway. But again, you need then players who can puck handle through the neutral zone and through traffic. And right now, the Kraken just don't have those guys, or we're not seeing those guys do it. I think they have some of those guys. I think Chandler Stevenson is somebody who can. I think Berkey is somebody who can. I think Bjorkstrand is somebody who can. But we're not seeing them do it at all. And so, it's an option for the Kraken to try. It would be a total change in philosophy, though, to go from this transition up, move up the ice north-south to try to go to an east-west neutral zone scheme. But that's really the only other option I see for the Kraken is if you did want those controlled entries, you'd have to force guys to play completely different than what you're scheming them up to do now.
And that's going to take a lot of practice time and a lot of coordination, because if you get that wrong too, the puck's going the other way fast, probably for a breakaway if you're trying to do everything the neutral zone. So that's not the kind of thing to try without practicing it a lot first. So it's not something we're going to see anytime soon.
Yeah. So there are some scheme things that can maybe work for the Kraken overall and in the offensive zone, but a lot of it at the end of the day, RJ, is just going to have to come from the players. And they're just going to have to start going to those areas of the ice. They're going to just have to start getting open for things. They're just going to have to start doing it. And like I said, you've slowly been removing variables around this one thing, and that one thing is the core group of guys just maybe isn't enough at the NHL level from an offensive perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where we're getting to really with our expectations for this team, where last week we talked about they're probably a playoff team, because if you just take care of the teams that you should and you play the other team, the good teams close, then you're fine. But this week has really given me a lot of pause about that, where they were not able to take care of, say, in Ottawa, and they, were not able to play like Toronto and Boston close. And then you start to ask more questions about, okay, is this actually a playoff team?
Yeah, because those are the teams you need to beat to make the playoffs. Those are 500-ish teams, right? Boston, I think, entered that game with the same record as the Kraken. They did not look like a team that should have the same record as the Kraken. They look so substantially better than them, right? Toronto has gone through struggles. They are a beatable group right now. And you didn't really look close against them either. And obviously Ottawa's a beatable group. They sure seem destined for 500. Maybe on the right side of 500 though, from a playoff perspective. But it's just one of those where it really killed you, because yes, it's a road trip. Yes, that's tough, but this was a good road trip as far as the opponents you're facing. Like, you had the chance to really go on this road trip and walk away from it 3-2, and you're just not.
Yeah, and so we're starting to see, because look, we said give it 20 games. Mm-hmm. And that's why I wanted to ask you about kind of how you feel about the progress. And I mean, we just talked a whole lot about where the team is at right now, but it's been 13 games out of the 20. How concerned are you about their ability to get it looking right in 7 games time?
I mean, until something changes, I'm going to be very concerned, because I'm sitting here looking on Natural Stat Trick at like the rolling averages for any offensive metric at any strength situation, and it is just a chart in decline. It is, and it's almost like a straight diagonal angle down to the right, and that's a problem. That's not the direction it should be, right? With a new coaching staff and giving them 20 games and getting guys more comfortable with each other and figuring out the right line combinations and all of that stuff, this should be a chart that is heading in a positive direction, as we're now on the back half of that 20 games. And instead it is very, very much moving in a negative direction. And that is not a good sign at all.
Right. I'm with you. And it does feel early in the season. I forget where I saw who the quote was from. I'm so sorry. I forgot who the quote was from, but was it Forsland? I don't remember. I don't want to misattribute it, but that eventually early in the season just becomes the season. Yeah. And I think we are actually kind of fast approaching that point. We talked about the 20 game mark, and where Bilesma said they needed to get to, that 7 games away. And then the other milestone of American Thanksgiving, where that's something that a lot of teams will look at to kind of gauge where they are, because the historical stat, about 3/4 of teams, over 75% historically, that are in a playoff position on American Thanksgiving end up making the playoffs. And of course, the flip side of that, where it's like less than 30 that don't. You look at last year too, in the Western Conference, there were 2 teams actually out of the 8 that were in playoff position come Thanksgiving that didn't make it. And that was St. Louis and Seattle actually was one of those teams. But 2 teams that were out of it that did make it, Edmonton and Nashville. But you look at what's required at that point if you're not in playoff position. And you look at Edmonton, who had a 16-game win streak that helped them get in. And then Nashville, their 18-game point streak, only a couple of OTLs in there, but you get 16 wins out of 18. That's the kind of thing that becomes almost necessary if we get to the point of November 27th at the end of the day and the Kraken are not in playoff position. So this actually can kind of sneak up on you pretty fast.
Yeah, and I mean, we are already at November 5th, RJ. Like it is really sneaking up on all of us, I feel like. So that's yeah, these next really every game, it feels like until Thanksgiving becomes critical, or the next 7 games for when you get to that 20 game mark. Because we were talking like, okay, if the Kraken go like 500-ish, maybe a game or two below, you can, but things are coming together, then this is very doable, and that's very much something that they can go and do. The fact that things seem to be coming apart, the one big new change that the coaching staff brought in was the style of play that has just now completely been taken away from you, and just team after team is repeatedly stopping. The offense completely drying up. The fact that you're not even able to average 2 expected goals per game. These are all really, really bad signs moving forward here. And again, as much as I want to say Vince Dunn being out contributes to all this, because it does, it should not contribute this much to it. Like that indicate that there's just no way that you should be that dependent on one single player. And speaking of single players, RJ, looking at some of the performances, because I feel like we have a large enough sample size now to kind of look at some trends for individuals on this team, as we've talked about it kind of as a whole. We look at the struggling offense, and so I go, and I know you've done this as well, and you've been keeping better tabs on it. You go, RJ, and you look, I'm on Natural Stat Trick, but you could go to Money Puck, wherever, and I'm looking at expected goals for percentage for the Kraken, and I'm looking at the guys at the very bottom, and there's one name that's very much at the bottom here, and the percentage is unbelievably poor.
Yeah, and it's Chandler Stephenson.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'll let you do the reveal.
Yeah, the reveal, Chandler Stephenson is the name, and only 36% expected goal share while he's on the ice at 5-on-5 for the Kraken. And the actual results aren't any better. The actual goal share is 33%. So he's been on the ice for 5 goals for and 10 goals against at 5-on-5. And for a big free agent acquisition, that's just not good enough. And we know he's not somebody who's going to go and score a bunch of goals himself. That's never been his game. And, he's more of a distributor, but still to get kind of caved in like this for a lot of the time, 5-on-5. And I know he's playing some tough minutes. Those results aren't good, and they are worst on the team. And so it is kind of something worth looking at, because this is somebody who they've given a lot of money and term to, and he and his line mates have been consistently at the bottom of these numbers. And by the way, I do want to just do a quick aside here, because we have talked a lot about like expected goals. We've brought a lot of these, advanced stats into things. And I don't want it to seem like we're just leaning on these numbers and we're just looking at the numbers and seeing what they say, because I think any time we invoke these stats, right, we're doing it to back up something that we're seeing. Dylan and I both watch every game. We both look at this stuff very closely. And so I think what happens is we see something, we get a feeling for it when we watch the game, and we go and check on these numbers to see, okay, does this back what our thoughts are from the eye test from watching the game? And so that's the reason we mention it too, because I know we've gotten some comments here and there of just, the numbers don't tell the whole story. We're looking at the game. It does require that context, and I think we're using it as just part of the overall context, because it matches what I'm seeing with him on the ice as well.
Right. I mean, this is why counting stats can be so deceptive, because if you look at just the counting stats for Chandler Stephenson, they look pretty good, actually, at least on this team, as far as him being a good contributor offensively and being somebody that's maybe helping drive offense. But you watch
8 points in 13 games. That alone looks good.
It does.
But you put it in context, you have 4 of those points. Again, that Montreal game where we've talked plenty about that. Nobody was playing defense. The goaltending was bad. And you have 4 points in 12 games. And even just that one bit of context helps you get a better picture.
Right. But you look at the games and you watch Chandler Stephenson in the offensive zone. And again, he's probably, the number one guy, as I'm talking about all these guys that are distributors that just kind of skate around the perimeter and don't really do too much. He is the number one guy that's just going to skate around in the offensive zone, and he's going to throw pucks at guys, but they're not great chances, right? He's not doing anything to generate offense in any way. If he was playing with somebody, I think he's got the skill passing to find them, but he himself is not going to do anything to generate offense. This is kind of who we knew he was, right? Is that it's the struggles with the offense, and he's not going to generate too much. And also, especially defensively, because like there's two ways you can have an even or a decent looking expected goals for percentage here, RJ, and that's by being really good in the offensive zone, so you're generating a lot, or at least keeping things from happening at the other end. And Chandler Stevenson is very bad at keeping things from happening at the other end. He's a very poor defensive center. We knew this coming in back when he was signed. If you go back and you watch that podcast on July 1st that we did, I bring out metric after metric after metric that shows he is a black hole offensively net front. There's just nothing going on. And then in the defensive zone net front, where you don't want anything going on, it's just like red hot activity. Guys can just get by him like it's nothing. And we're seeing that, right? Like you watch a Kraken game, that is what happens here. And that's concerning when you're not generating things in high percentage places offensively and you're allowing them to be generated defensively. You end up here where you're hovering around 36% of expected goal share.
Yeah, and I am almost hesitant I don't want to feel like we're piling on Chandler Stevenson, because this is exactly who he was in Vegas, right? He's not playing any differently than what we know he's been. It's not like he's not giving effort or playing to the best of his abilities, right? He's doing what we've seen him do. It's just that you put him in this situation where you're not attached to a Mark Stone or just on a different team, and the results are more or less predictable. But it's still worth pointing out, though, because he's not the difference maker that maybe Ron Francis was hoping he'd be. I know in an interview early last week, Francis said that he felt that Stevenson had the potential to be an 80-point player, which that one did stand out to me a little bit as far as the comments. But I don't know. We're just not seeing it.
If he plays the Canadians every game.
Yeah, that's true. If he plays that team every game, yeah, maybe he could hit 80 points.
Yeah. Now the other players down there, you'd mentioned that it's really that line. And, second worst on the team, expected goal share wise, is Andre Burakovsky, right? Has been down there. I know plenty of people have been critical. I've been trying to defend him in situations. It is.
You know what, Dylan?
Tough.
I will throw you a bone here, because we talked about it after post game ended last game.
Yeah.
I will give you last game. I thought he was good.
Yeah, I think
the overall body work, I stand by what I said, but last game I thought he was good.
Yeah, and I still think if you remove him off of that line, those numbers trend more positively, and it does seem like that is the case. But yeah, certainly him with Chandler Stevenson, it's just not good, and that's something that the Kraken should probably be breaking up sooner rather than later. Elsewhere, you look at Eeli Tolvanen's the next lowest forward there at about 40%. So these are the guys that are struggling right now for the team, and they are causing the ice to be tilted against the Kraken when they're out there, and that's something that you need to work on and improve. On the flip side, RJ, we can talk about some positive players here, and the best player on the Kraken. There's only two players on this team that have positive goal share, RJ. One forward and one defenseman, and I think they both deserve to be talked about. The defenseman is Jamie Alexiak. And I think outside of game one, he has looked really solid this season, and he's played really well. But I think the most notable person to talk about here is Shane Wright, because we've been saying for a long time, he's almost the exact opposite situation of Chandler Stevenson, RJ, where we've been saying eye test wise, look at him. He is playing absolute great hockey right now. He is doing things to generate opportunity for the guys around him. He's playing solid defense. He's a good two-way center. He is playing the game the right way. The production just has not been there. I think is he still sitting on 2 points?
Yes, I believe he is, and they're both in the same game, in that Philly game.
Right. But he's been playing excellent hockey, whereas Chandler Stevenson obviously has the 8 points, has a big flashy 4-point night against Montreal, but the hockey has not been great from him, and the numbers say that, and the visual eye test stuff says that. But Shane Wright, 54.3% at 5-on-5 here, RJ. Shane Wright has been playing wonderful hockey, even though he is not being rewarded on the stat sheet for it.
Right. And we're seeing all the good signs and everything that he's doing. And I think we talked about this plenty last week, but he's kind of taking on that more workmanlike role that doesn't get rewarded with the points, but does a lot to generate offense that's happening. And so we're seeing a lot of good play from him. The one thing with Shane Wright, because we want to see his production get going, and I think the team needs his production to get going, I would like to see him get a little bit more ice time. Shane Wright has never played more than 16 and a half minutes. 16-17 is the most ice time he has ever gotten in an NHL game. That was earlier this season against Dallas. But I would like to see what an 18-minute ice time Shane Wright game looks like. He's playing well enough that I'm not worried about, throwing him in the deep end, so to speak, right? And I don't even think that end is that deep, 18 minutes. I think that's something that's manageable.
Yeah.
I would like to see that from him, just to see what he can do with it. I want to give him a little bit more of that opportunity. Maybe that would probably mean putting him with McCann and Eberle, which we did discuss in the last post game. I would have no problem with that, and moving Matty Beniers to another line, at least temporarily. But I want to see more from him, just more opportunity, really.
Yeah, and I think he's earned it. I think he deserves it. I think his play has done that. Finally, we're at the point where his offensive zone starts are higher than his defensive zone starts. So, again, the worry of throwing him in the deep end, they kind of were anyway. We talked about this a couple podcasts ago. His line was the top line on the team, and they were starting the heaviest in the defensive zone. Like, they were finding ways of moving the puck up the ice. And really what this tells me, because we've now seen Jordan Eberle and Jared McCann with Matty Beniers for a while, and Matty Beniers is 11 percentage points behind Shane Wright as far as expected goal share, tells me that Shane Wright was heavily contributing to that. It wasn't just that he was writing what McCann and Eberle were doing out there, because if that was the case at this point, Matty would be looking better and Shane Wright might have fallen off a little bit. But instead, Shane Wright is continuing to play great hockey, regardless of where you start him, regardless of who he's playing with. He has been a consistent, positive driver of anything for the Kraken this year in a way that just nobody else on this team has been. I mean, the next best forwards are Jared McCann and Jordan Eberle, and they're still a little ways behind him as far as expected goal share.
Right. And those guys, we've seen what they've produced so far this season, right? It's amazing the points discrepancy, right? And just the counting stats and the points between those guys and a Shane Wright, given what they're all generating offensively.
Yeah. So I think that's something we're seeing. I think if again, you're bringing up Ryan Winterton, means you're probably going with him tonight. You're probably not going to be going the John Hayden route. And again, trying to go gritty and just grind one out and just get a positive game and get positive momentum. If you're going to go in the other direction, I really don't know why you wouldn't stick Shane Wright with Eberle and McCann again, RJ, and then give that line like 22 minutes. Just play them like they are, like you're a one-line team, because guess what? Looking at these metrics and really looking at the eye test as well, you kind of are a one-line team. I know it feels like you have a lot of depth, but right now all that depth is not contributing. It's not producing. It's not doing anything for you. Just load up your top guys, the guys that are playing well, and give them as much ice time as possible is what I say.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's the other thing too. I wanted to talk about Jared McCann as part of this, and you can throw Eberle in there. You can throw that whole line. But you look at top players around the league, and this was a conversation point coming into this season, right? Is with Dave Haxtell, the Kraken would really evenly distribute their ice time among the forward lines. I know this team is built to have kind of four lines you can roll in the depth and everything, but I feel like this season we have seen a line, whether it's basically any line that McCann and Eberle are on, right? Step up as the team's true top line, as their best line. And they still haven't really been getting the ice time that a traditional top line has in the NHL. And that goes to individual players as well. And the one that really stands out to me is Jared McCann, because despite he has 14 points in 13 games, he is the guy kind of driving the bus offensively for Seattle. He's still averaging 16:44 of ice time per game. And that's just not something you see from top scorers in the NHL. I'm looking at everybody who's got, 13 or more points in the NHL. And really McCann is kind of by himself almost with how little ice time he's getting. There's two other guys in that category, Nikolai Ehlers and Matt Duchene, that also have, similar points and that little ice time. But it's clear why. I mean, Duchene is really a secondary piece and maybe even a tertiary piece for Dallas. And then Nikolai Ehlers, again, kind of a secondary piece for Winnipeg, even as good as he is. He's not part of that top line. I don't know what the reasoning is for Jared McCann. He's clearly the team's best forward. And remember, we were trying to figure this out. We looked at the NHL edge data when we were researching for this and trying to think. I know you had the idea of maybe he just skates more in that time. He covers more ground. He does so much in the time that he's out on the ice that you need to limit his shifts because of all that he's doing. But I think we kind of debunked that by looking at some of the other Kraken players, and he doesn't skate noticeably more distance than anybody else in his time on the ice. And I do wonder what the reasoning for that is. I'm going to ask Coach Dan about that as soon as the Kraken come back home, because I am curious why he is not playing the kind of ice time that any other player in the NHL with that kind of production is.
And I think there's another key component to this, which is also he plays on both special teams. He's getting 16 minutes and he's on your first unit power play and your second unit PK.
Yeah, that's because that would normally be the reason, right? If they're not playing on a special team, okay, that's why. But he is on both special teams. Yeah. So that can't be the answer.
Right. Like it does not make sense. I know we saw it under Hackstall. We're seeing it now under Dan, and I know they've been trying to go with the
which makes me think there's something we're missing.
4 lines thing. Yeah, but like I don't know what it could be, right? Like your mind goes to like weird stuff that I just don't think it is, which is like, oh, his conditioning's bad. Right, like that's not it. I can't believe that his conditioning is so bad that coaches have to shelter him like this. He plays good defense. It's not that he doesn't play defense or something. Like this isn't a Sprong situation where you're just like it just kills you as a coach watching this guy be a liability out there. That's not the case with Jared McCann. He's scoring. He does everything for you. I really it is very, very curious. It makes seemingly no sense at all.
Right. And so it's the kind of thing I can't wait to ask Bilesma about. So I will follow up on this when we have kind of an answer from the coach, because I don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't either. But I think seeing Shane with Ryan Winterton again tonight could be interesting. Seeing Shane with Jared McCann again tonight could be interesting, and kind of loading up and trying to go heavy in that direction. Kind of work back the ice time that you're giving the Chandler Stevenson line that we know is not working, and maybe
Stevenson is getting legit ice time. He's getting 19, 20 minutes a night.
Right. And he has been your worst player, arguably.
Yeah.
And Berkey's been getting more ice time, all that kind of stuff because of it. Jaden Schwartz as well. And it doesn't make sense to do that. That's something that's got to change.
I'm looking at, I just ranked it just by NHL forwards by ice time. Jared McCann is 141st in the NHL by average ice time per game, behind guys right around him: Connor McMichael, Kent Johnson, Maxim Siplakov. There's Jordan Eberle. Jordan Eberle's right there in that same camp too. So yeah, Losterainen, Logan O'Connor.
Yeah,
these are this company that he has.
This is not the company of guys that are nearly a point per game.
Yep. So
and have led your team in scoring the last ever.
I know.
So that's something that I think probably needs to change, and we'll see if we see it tonight, RJ, against a Colorado team that, hey, if you did load up and gave a lot of ice time, probably going to do well, as long as they're not out there against Nathan MacKinnon, because this Colorado team has no depth to it whatsoever. This does seem like the kind of game to go for an experiment like that.
Yes. If there was ever a get right game for a team that needs offense, it is this one, this opponent. The Avs have allowed 5 goals each in their last 3 games. The one before that, they allowed 4 goals. They have been giving up goals left and right. They are decimated by injuries. They can't defend all that well. This is the get right game. This is the opportunity. This is the spot. And so they just got to take advantage of it. By the way, breaking news here: Philip Grubauer looks like he is starting tonight for the Kraken. Also, Justus Anunen will start for Colorado in net.
Okay. Did we get lines?
No, because this is all from the Colorado people. So We never
Gotcha.
we never get lines at these road game mornings.
I know. All right, so we'll see what the lines shake out to be tonight. We'll see how the Kraken perform, if they can get something going. I said it on the last post game. It felt like you found two rock bottoms here. You found a rock bottom that was below rock. It was harder rock, I guess. We'll see if you can start bouncing back, moving forward here. It seems like this is a game to do it, and hopefully they can. Want to thank everybody so much for listening. Thank Queen Anne Beer Hall for sponsoring the podcast. As always, one more time, RJ, give a rundown of that new burger of the month.
Yeah, everyone go try out the new burger of the month. It is the Jalapeno Popper Smash Burger. Again, it has, as I pull this up,
It's the jalapeno cream cheese, the fried onion strings, and bacon.
Yes, you remembered it perfectly. What am I pulling this up for? You got it.
There we go.
I'm pulling it up to just look at the picture again because it's going to make me hungry. I need some lunch.
Yeah, go get one, RJ. Why not? Thanks everybody so much for listening, and we will see you all next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.